going to love the one here at Reeve. It's the wrong Abbey's. Said how much she said. Who's she?
Who's she?
Who's she?
I don't know.
Kay said to me, who tamed this land? And more importantly, how... No. That we had a mystery of our own. Oh, yes. It was the mystery of the ink.
Oh, gosh.
Kay was sat knitting as we travelled back in time to 1177 AD. How had the ink got onto the carpet, onto my hands, and caused the kerfuffle it caused that morning? Yeah. That inspired the rose window in York, at York Minster. No, don't go off script. Just prepare yourselves, because this is one handsome fella.
He is indeed.
This is one of the reasons why I wanted to knit this. You know me and my men on docks. Welcome, everybody, to the Bakery Bears video show featuring the triumphant return of the rise and fall of the monasteries. I say that with a due sense of cheer, and because I know how wonderful my favourite blanket is. Hey, look, while we're mentioning my favourite blanket, I must just say we've had messages every so often saying, where is the pattern for my favourite blanket?
Yes.
And the pattern is, of course, as we mentioned, we try and mention it every time we put out a video show featuring my favourite blanket. The pattern's available to all our Bakery Bear patrons, and it's always linked in the show notes below the episode where my favourite blanket appears.
Yeah.
So if you're looking for the latest my favourite blanket pattern, go to Bakery Bears video show episode 221 and look in the show notes below, and there you will find a link which takes you straight to the pattern.
Yes.
And anytime we put out my favourite blanket, the pattern is linked to the show notes below.
Yes, so that's the written pattern that Dan's referring to. You I'm actually obviously showing you all of the pattern within the videos. So
you don't need the pattern.
You don't need it, but I know that some people like to have the written pattern.
Yes.
So
we just wanted to say at the start, because we have had a few people asking that question, and now we can put that to bed and just pull up the lovely cosy blanket that is the rise and fall of the monasteries and get all snuggly.
I like the link.
Was that a good link?
Well,
it's a blanket.
Yes.
I do it without even realising. It's so funny. Oh, my goodness. Yes, this time, my goodness, we're so excited to take you to one of our favourite monasteries. It's just the business. And also, as well, what's been so lovely about this series, and I just didn't anticipate this, and I was thrilled when Kay watched this episode back, and she said how much she said. Who's she?
Who's she?
Who's she?
I don't know.
Kay said to me how much she enjoyed the little segment where we learn about what's going on in the world at the time.
Yes.
And I was thrilled at that, because one of my passions is sort of global history and understanding, you know, what's going on in the world at particular points of time. I love that. I'm really passionate about that.
Yeah.
And sometimes when I go off on one and I start talking about stuff, Kay sort of glazes over.
I do, yeah.
So to actually package it in a way where you just loved it makes me very excited about the rest of the series.
Yeah, I think it's great to, you know, because you can find out all about the monastery, can't you, and what's going on. But I think to sort of ground it within the world at that time and to know what else is going on in the world whilst, you know, those monks are living the life that they're living, it gives it context, and it really kind of helped bring it to life. I absolutely loved this episode. I kept ranting on and on and on, didn't I? To Dan about it.
I'm so thrilled. I'm so thrilled that she did, because, well, you'll see later, won't you?
You will. You'll see it.
Up.
You'll love it.
Now, just to tip you off, actually, walking the wall, I don't know whether you got the vibe, but what I was also trying to do was I was trying to tell the story of the history of England with the wall, effectively, as the backdrop. Well, just to give you a little tip-off, the whole plan with the rise and fall of the monasteries was, yes, we're going to learn about the rise and fall of the monasteries, but I'd hoped that within that process we could as well look at the sort of general history of England. And really, it's really of Europe, which is quite cool.
That's true. It travels across the channel in this episode.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. It's marvellous. It's all to come later.
Yeah.
Now, what a week we've had. What a 2 weeks we've had. Because, yes, Kay has become very passionate about Agatha Christie books. Haven't you?
Yes.
My brother, Dom, who writes all the music for our main features, so Rise for the Monasteries, written by my brother Dom, all the music, he bought you for Christmas.
Yeah.
And then there were none.
And then there were none. Yeah, and I read it and absolutely loved it. And I'm sure that I have seen a TV version of this
And
at
now
some
you're
point,
reading.
but I'd forgotten. And now I'm reading Murder at the Vicarage, the first Miss Marple novel,
So
which I'm also loving.
it was no surprise then, given Kay's sort of love of the Agatha Christie mystery, that we had a mystery of our own. Oh yes. It was the mystery of the ink.
Oh, God.
Kay was sat knitting. I came in, I sat down, and I looked at my hand, and there was like, what colour ink
Turquoise.
was it? There was turquoise ink dried on my hands.
On his hands.
And I hadn't used a pen that morning. So I'm looking at my hand and I'm thinking, what on earth is this? I look to my right and I see ink on the carpet.
On the carpet.
Da, da, da. Oh my goodness. It was like, I'm like, oh my goodness.
It was not a good moment.
Look, I know you're all panicking. Everyone's like thinking they need to skip on to find out what was the resolution. Don't worry, it came out.
It came out.
But the question was...
I got it off the carpet.
The question was, I had not used a pen that morning.
Yeah.
How had the ink got onto the carpet, onto my hands, and caused the kerfuffle it caused that morning?
Yeah.
Well,
I then noticed...
It needed a genius to solve.
Because I was here at my desk and I then noticed that I'd also got a little bit of this blue ink on my finger. I was like, this is so weird.
What is going on?
And then I thought through what Dan had done that morning.
I'd cut up some paper.
He'd wrapped up a gift for someone, right? And
for you, it was Mother's Day.
Oh, that's right.
I'd wrapped up.
And
oh no, it wasn't a book because you don't know. Really.
No, he was sat on the carpet down there, and he wrapped up the gift. And he said, "Oh, it must have rubbed off the wrapping paper." I said, "Get on." I said,
because I did not write a. There was no writing. No writing was done.
There was
at any
no
point.
tags. There were no tags.
No
on
tags,
it.
and the card had been written the day before.
Yes. So, but it'd been on the carpet there where the ink was. So I thought, right, what would he have done to wrap up that present? He would have got paper and he would have got scissors.
Yes.
And then I was like, where would he have got the scissors from? He would have got the scissors from my pen pot.
It's like Miss Marple's here.
On my desk, right? So I went over to my pen pot, picked up the scissors, and there's blue ink on the end of the scissors.
Boom!
And do you know what had happened? There was an ink refill in the pen pot, and it was a Energel cleaner. And do you know, you might not know, but they have like this little bobbly bit of plastic over the end of the refill that you have to pull off. You know, for them to work. It had come off and it had leaked ink all, like there was a massive puddle of ink in the bottom of my pen pot. It couldn't be rescued, the pen pot, unfortunately. There was so much of it, there's no way I could have rescued it, so I had to replace that. But we solved it. So there was like ink all over the scissors. He'd put the scissors on the carpet. Mystery solved.
Amazing. Do you know what?
It didn't make me any happier that there was ink on the carpet, I've got to say.
It did come out, though.
It did come out.
Yeah. It wasn't a complete disaster.
Yeah, we used some, I don't know.
Stuff. We used stuff and it came out. Yeah. Now, if that wasn't enough drama, about 6 months ago, we bought for our daughter Bryony, who is currently at sixth form college, we bought her a new computer. Because it's supposedly, we were told...
A new laptop.
Including by college and by her.
That she
like
needed.
from everywhere, she needs a computer. So bought her this new computer and she hasn't turned it on for 6 months.
No.
Part of me loves that because it's cool.
It's pen and paper, you know, and she does use the computers at school for doing things.
She does, when she has to. And I was thrilled when she said, you know, can I use the computer? Because I thought, it wasn't a complete waste. So went and got the computer. Could I turn it on?
Couldn't figure out how to turn it on.
I'm the first person. I'm good with Look, I'm telling you, I feel like I'm defending myself. I'm good with technology. Throughout my whole life, people have called me up when there's been problems to solve. I used to work on a customer services desk in an electronic shop. Could I turn this thing on? I could not.
No.
Do you know what? I'm furious, and I'd love to know if there's anyone out there who feels the same way. Technology has got so intuitive, you can't even work out how to turn it on.
No.
And do you know the other thing that absolutely makes my brain explode is when you get at something new and there's no instructions.
No instructions.
Because you don't need them. Because it's so easy. Well, it never is.
No.
It's so... But look...
But we did work it out.
Yeah, because we had to Google it.
We all gathered around the laptop and we were like, right,
Googled
okay.
it.
And I said, well, what's this? There was like a blank button with nothing on it.
And it's because of the thumb reedy thing. Why you can't have ink? Why it can't say on/off? Why that ruins the thumb reading is beyond me.
No.
Anyway, you can see.
We figured it out.
It's been 2 weeks of total drama. But what a show we have in store, because lots of lovely projects.
Yes.
2 interesting finished projects.
One lovely, one interesting.
Finished project.
Yes.
And of course, as we've already said, a rather wonderful episode of The Rise of the Monasteries. So, without further ado, less waffle, more action, and I shall ask, Kay Jones, what's on your needles?
Right. So the first thing on my needles is something that is also very interesting, let's say. And I'll explain it to you in a second. But yeah, this project's in a lovely bag, actually. This beautiful bag was made for me by my friend Sasha. She doesn't have a shop or anything like that. She just made me this quite a few years ago, and I just love it. It's so sweet. So in this bag is I don't know what to call it. Right, I'll tell you the name of the pattern. It's called the Grandma Core Hood, and it's by a Finnish designer. Her name's down here at the bottom of the pattern. Veronica is her first name. And this pattern came to my attention because she does a podcast, and one of her podcasts popped up on YouTube one day. I'd never seen it before, and it was all snowy and lovely because she's in Finland, and I thought, I might just go and have a watch of that. And I realised that she was a knitting designer after watching it, and she had on this hood. And I thought, well, that's incredibly cute. And it made me think of a conversation I'd had with a family member recently, a young family member. Bryony disagreed with this and said it wasn't a fashion thing. But this family member said, the balaclavas and sort of hood type things were back in fashion. And I laughed at her and I said, get on, nobody's going to wear a balaclava these days. I see balaclavas as like a 70s garment that kids were forced into under duress.
But which American footballer was it? I think it was Stefan Diggs of the Buffalo Bills, who on the way to their playoff game,
Did he have one on?
It wasn't even a balaclava. There was no holes for the eyes.
Are you kidding?
No, it was... It was
like he was going to rob a bank.
It was a knitted...
No eye hole.
No, because the gauge was super loose.
So we could just see through it. That's bizarre.
I assume so.
That's bizarre. I don't recommend you do that.
No, neither would I.
You might fall over, might you? But yeah, apparently, this was a conversation a couple of months ago that I'd had, but I'd sort of stored that bit of information in my head. Bryony's like, no, they're not. But I'd stored that bit of information in my head. So when I saw this, I thought, oh my gosh, that's so cute. And it is, like, I'll show you the picture down here. But you can see down here, she's wearing it as like a cowl here and then as like a little hood here. And it's just so cute. I was like, that's really cute. I think I want to make one of those, bizarrely. So I showed it to Bryony and I said, could I wear that? And she just sort of laughed at me and said, you're not going to wear that, are you? I said, well, do you know what? I might do. But worst case, I would wear it as a cowl because it looks super cute as a cowl. It just looks like you've got a hood on your jumper and you've got your hood down. And it was in a lace pattern. It's like a diamond, really for me, it's quite a traditional vintage looking lace pattern. And I remember my mum knitting school cardigans with like this pattern on. I thought, right, I'm going to go look at the pattern and see what yarn you need. And it calls for 2 yarns held together. So you need a DK weight and you need like a mohair silk weight blend as well. And you hold them together. So at first I thought, well, I could use my blacker yarns, Blacker Swan, because that's DK, and the yardage actually was almost exactly the same as the recommended yarn. I thought, great, but I didn't have enough in one colour. It uses about 125 grams, and they come in 50-gram balls, the blacker, and I only had 2 in each colour, so I thought, right, okay. So then I thought, well, do you know what? I'm going to go look at the recommended yarn. And the recommended yarn is by Sandness Garn. I know I'm saying that wrong. I'm really sorry, but that's how I just would say it being an English person. And it's called Double Sunday. And it's a merino yarn. It's 100% merino, but it's non-superwash. So it's actually very similar to the blacker, in that the blacker is also a merino and it's non-superwash. So I found a shop in this country that stocked it. It's called Yarn Works, WORX is how you spell works. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to go and buy some because I've never tried it. I'm intrigued by it and I want to give it a go. So I ordered 3 balls in this colour, which is, it's 2351 taupe. So I've got 3 balls. So there it is, Double Sunday. So it's a double knit, 50-gram balls, and you get 108 metres. Yes, 108 metres for 50 grams. It's lovely. So I'll talk about that in a second. But I needed the mohair to go with it. Now, I do have undyed Suri alpaca and silk in my sort of dyeing stash. But I know that yarn is a bit thicker than a mohair silk. But I thought it'll be okay. I'll use it anyway. But then I thought, well, let me look at what she recommends as the mohair. And she recommended a mohair by Knitting for Olive. And this shop where I bought this happened to have that mohair. And again, it's a new to me yarn. I thought, do you know what? I'm going to get a ball of that as well. So I did, but I'm not using it. I'll tell you why in a minute. But I did get a ball of it. So it's Knitting for Olive. You can see there. And it's the mohair silk. And this colour I got was oat. So this is oat. So it's a mohair silk 70-30 and you get 225 metres for 25 grams and you just need 1 of these. Although I didn't use it, do you know what? This is, because the reason I didn't use it is because I do have a bit of a problem with mohair. I'm one of those people that mohair feels a bit prickly. But do you know what? This one feels really soft. And I will definitely use this. And I could have absolutely used it. It does feel really soft. So if you are looking for a mohair silk, if you're like me and you're a bit funny with mohair silk, this one, it's really nice. There is a merest hint of a prickle, but not like I normally get with like like the Drops or Rowan Kid Silk. So yeah, I mean, it seems really nice. But the reason I didn't use it is because I had a different yarn already in my stash and I thought, you know what, I'm going to use that. And I've had this one for a while. So the one I'm using and holding double is a Rowan. It's Rowan Cashmere Haze. I bought this ages ago to try and never used it. And this one is 40% alpaca, 30% cashmere and 30% silk. So it doesn't have that mohair element. And the colour I've got here is 702. So that's what I'm holding double. And the colour that I've got is this sort of very soft blush colour. And the yardage, I've got a little bit more yardage than it recommends, so I know I've got enough. And this is like a teddy bear. It's super soft. Now, I got this from Wool Warehouse, and it was quite expensive when I bought it, but I noticed when I went to look the other day, they've discontinued it, and it's now half price. So I think it was like £20, which is ridiculous. I don't know what motivated me to buy it at the time, but it's now £10. So if you wanted to give it a try, saying that, they've discontinued it. That does kind of, Rowan do have a habit of doing this. They'll run a yarn, won't they? And you'll fall in love with it and then they'll discontinue it. I know they can't keep all of their lines going all the time, but anyway. So I am holding the double Sunday and the Rowan together. And let me show you how far I am. It's the weirdest thing I think I've ever made. So this is currently what it looks like. Can you see? You knit it back and forth. And you start off, you cast on here and you knit this panel. And then you sort of pick up stitches and start working the sort of down bit. So this will sit on top of the head like this. And these are the sides that are coming down. So my face will be, shall I put it on my head? My face will be like that. So you knit all the way down here. And then I don't know what you do down here to finish off. I've not looked that far ahead yet. I'm just sort of going with the pattern as I come to it, if you know what I mean. And I love the lace pattern. It is very vintage, I think. And it's, perfectly pleasant to knit. Now, I'm using my beloved higher bamboos. And I'm using the called for needle size, which is 4mm. And that's all lovely. I didn't do a gauge swatch, I'll be honest. I just didn't. I thought, well, it'll be all right. Bit bigger, bit smaller, be all right. So that's how far I am. Now, it's a paid for pattern, so I obviously can't go into great details. But I've had some issues just reading the charts. The charts are, and it's just charted, it's not written. The charts are quite tiny on the pattern, and I print my patterns. I know that you can just have them on a device and you can zoom in. I don't like doing that. I like a pattern because I don't want to have technology around me when I'm knitting. I just like, I'm old school. I just like to have the pattern. And I worked through that first section, that panel here, using the chart that was in the pattern, but it's just quite difficult to see. The pattern didn't print very clearly. I had to draw in some grid lines so that I could see it clearly. But my main issue arose when I sort of picked up all these stitches here and started working all the way around, because it's lovely and the pattern actually flows from this section you've knit here. It then just flows, which I love, down here, and then the pattern just starts here and picks up and flows all the way down. So I think that's just brilliant. But I realised when you get onto this bit, so you're knitting the main bit, there's 3 different charts, and the way that it's formatted in the pattern, I just found it really clunky. It's probably the wrong word. It took me quite a long time to knit a row because I was following these 3 charts, and the way that they were laid out was a bit strange. But I realised that I could actually condense the chart. So after I realised that, I went to my charting software, I recharted it, I condensed it down, and now it's flying. So I obviously can't share my chart because it's a paid for pattern, but I just wanted to let you know what I'd done to make this a much more straightforward thing to actually knit, because now instead of looking at however many stitches around here and 3 charts, I've now just got a small chart. I know exactly what I'm doing and I can whiz around the rows, no problem. So I think there is another chart later on, just a smaller one, so it might be that I rechart that one as well. Maybe I will, I don't know, it might not be necessary. And I don't know what's, the rest of the pattern I haven't actually read through yet because I'm just doing it as I get to it. I tend to do that with patterns. I know you always recommend you should read through a pattern from start to finish. But even if I do that, I kind of just forget because you've then started and you're focusing on that bit, aren't you? So I'll focus on that bit and then I'll deal with the next bit when I get to it. I more do that really. So I'm enjoying it. I am really enjoying it now. But if I had to use the charts that were in the pattern, I don't know that I would be enjoying it because it makes it more laborious. But now I'm loving it. I've no idea if I'm going to wear this, I'll be honest. But I wanted to knit it. Do you know sometimes you just want to knit something? Well, I just wanted to knit it. So I am. So we'll see how it goes. The yarn's lovely. This double Sunday is lovely. It's nice and soft. It's a non-superwash, which I really like. And it's knitting up really nice. I think it was like £6.50 for 50 grams, which I think is a good price. So if you're looking for a non-superwash merino yarn, I'd really recommend this. It's really nice. I'm not sure where they're based. Is it Norway or somewhere like the Norwegian Yarn Factory? There we go. Since 1888. That's amazing, isn't it? So lovely yarn, interesting knit. We'll just see what happens. If any of you out there have knit this, there wasn't that many projects on Ravelry, but if you have, then do comment and let me know how you got on. I think that'd be really interesting. And I'll let you know how I get on next time. I'll show you again next time and let you know how I'm getting on. Dan Jones, what's on your needles?
It's a new jumper, and it's knitted with this. This is Jameson and Smith. What's the yarn again? I tell you what it isn't.
What isn't it?
Premium acrylic.
What? I don't understand.
Premium acrylic. Yes, I was editing about a week ago, and Kay was doing one of her reviews. Don't think it's been broadcast yet. And that sound drop you just heard, I lifted from the edit, because when she said that, it made me laugh so much, I thought, that needs to be my text alert on my phone.
It made me laugh when I saw it on the ball band, you know.
This is not.
That is not.
No.
Oh.
Don't talk over the sound drop.
Oh, sorry.
This is not.
Premium acrylic.
Oh, yes. It most certainly is not premium acrylic. This is lots of other lovely stuff.
It's Shetland. It's Jameson and Smith Shetland worsted Aran. It must be a worsted spun Aran. And this colour is light grey.
Beautiful. So that is the yarn itself. And I wanted to knit with this because I'm knitting Kay's Roosty tank top with fingering weight, which is lovely. The thicker, I don't like the thicker as much as the thinner. The thinner's nicer. This is a bit, I don't know.
It's just a 2-ply, which I think is quite unusual for an Aran weight.
Perfectly pleasant to knit with. I've done a few rounds of rib, as you can see here. Similar colour, actually.
Nice and soft.
To what Kay just showed you. And yeah, I've done a few rounds of rib, and it's working out perfectly fine. But I don't know. I mean...
Well, your stitches probably look different because it's a 2-ply instead of
I don't mind how the stitches look.
Oh, no, they look lovely. Your stitches look lovely.
It just feels a bit funny. It's a strange one, really.
Super neat.
The pattern is the Aaron Harper Gansey. Now, ladies, I'm going to show you a picture, and I want you to just prepare yourselves, because this is one handsome fella.
He is indeed.
This is one of the reasons why I wanted to knit this. You know me and my men on docks.
Yes.
Yes, there was the guy in the Radari with the rope on his shoulder. Yeah. Oh, yes. And also the Alexander.
Yes.
The cool dude.
He was cool.
Yes. And I think we've topped it all with this hunk. Yes.
He's fabulous. I'd like to know that man.
Yes. What a dude. So this is the Aaron Harper Gansey. It's not a Gansey. It's
not a Gansey.
No.
I don't know why they called it a Gansey.
Confusing.
It's quite confusing, but yeah.
I do want to knit a Gansey, and I've made an episode of the Self-Contained Knitter all about that. But this was all about wanting to cast on using this yarn and have a jumper in this yarn because it's super light. It's not as sort of toothy as the Let Lopey. So, all in all, it's going to be the type of jumper that I think you could probably wear indoors.
It feels
Whereas
lovely.
the Let Lope you can only wear indoors if you open all your windows and it's winter. And even then it's still a bit sweaty. But this, I think, probably will be something you can sort of bung on and, maybe sit around the house and then pop outside and not need to change clothes, which is what you really do end up needing to do with the Let Lopey. Love the Let Lopey to bits. I mean, it's absolutely the business, and I wear them loads, but I put them on as a coat when I go outside.
It looks so small, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, we'll just see how it goes. It always does, though.
Dan did a gauge swatch, and he got a spot-on gauge, and we've looked at the sizes and cast on the number that it says, so, I mean, all should be good, really.
Using the square needles, which are working up lovely.
Cubics.
And really sort of nice lead.
It's not a dog lead.
The cable.
Cable.
The cable.
Or cord.
Really nice cord. Really nice, no ridges. It's sort of working backwards and forwards. Really nice. 5 mils casted on with going up to 6 mils.
Yeah.
So Aaron Harper Gansey, Jameson and Smith, and I'm thoroughly enjoying, the process so far. Primarily because there's only 190 stitches on
It's
them.
not even that.
160.
Yeah, 160.
Crumbs. We'll see how
I
we go.
know.
What else is on your needles?
Right. So, I'm working away on Dan's socks, and I've finished a sock, and I'm well on with the second one. Thanks to my 10 rows a day, brilliant, genius invention. I'm joking, I did not invent it. But it works.
Okay, is this knitted in?
Premium acrylic.
All right, we've had enough of that now, haven't we? Enough now. It's absolutely not.
It's not.
No, of course it's not.
It most certainly isn't.
Premium acrylic.
Not that we have a problem with.
Premium acrylic.
Well, clearly not, because I bought some, and I'm going to show you. The next thing I'm going to show you is knit with the yarn that I was talking about right there.
I mean, we're quite partial to.
Premium acrylic.
Yeah, but that's the last time now, otherwise I'm going to punch you in the face.
Okay. I just can't stop.
So Dan's socks, these rainbow socks that I'm making for him, I'm using the Creolian design yarns.
Brilliantly done.
Yeah, someone did tell me how to say it and I still can't remember, so I do apologise. But it's this yarn, and it's a self-striping rainbow club from September 21, 75-25, and it's gorgeous. I've knit with her yarn before and loved it, and I love this. And I finished a sock, and I'm well on to the second one. I'll tell you how long it's taken me because I've written it in my book. But look at them. Look at the gloriousness of that sock. It's not been blocked or anything. And I don't have a blocker big enough to put it on. Even if it fits on the blocker, it sticks off the end by a mile, so I won't bother. But aren't those stripes lovely? So pretty and fun and bright, and lovely. A lovely summer shorty sock for Dan.
We do have giant blockers now, though, don't we?
We do have.
But no, you don't need to put it on.
I can't reach.
It's fine.
Woke up with a horrible.
We can check it next time.
Neck thing.
I just thought it was important just to mention because we were sent them and they are just marvellous.
We do have
so
some.
Thank you so much.
Yes, we do have some large blockers. Yes, we do. So here's his finished sock, all done. And look where I am on the second one. I mean, it's just amazing because normally Dan's socks just drag, but I'm on the foot. Look how far down I am. Amazing. And look at that. I mean, I just started. I quite like mismatched socks. Look, can you see how one's not the same as the other? When it's self-striping, I don't generally have a problem with one being different to the other because it is quite a faff to make them start at the same point, unless you've got those skeins that are split, of course. But even then, you can be out by a few stitches because you've got to start casting on, haven't you? When it's long tail, you've got to work out the exact distance in that you started casting on. And I have done that before. I've measured it to make sure that I start at exactly the same point. But even then, I've been a few stitches out because your gauge changes and whatever. So I don't generally even try to make them match because I think they look cuter when they're not matching. But on this one, look, I plumbing got to the heel flap and I was on the blue. I wanted it to sort of be a contrast, which it's not really, but it doesn't matter. It's totally fine. And I'm on the foot, so I have to do, for these shorty socks, my total number of rounds from after the cuff here all the way down to the toe is 125. So what I do, I put a marker when I get to 50, which is here, and then I count every 10 and just move the marker. And I keep a note in my daily planner because I always plan forward what I'm going to knit for a few days. And I just make a note of what row number I'm on so that the next day I know what I'm on. I'm currently on 80 rounds. So I've got, 45 rounds left and then the toe. So this will be finished, I think, early next week is how I've planned it. So in my little book this time, I thought it'd be interesting. just to jot down the date that I cast this one on and finished it. So I started it on the 4th of March and I finished this sock on the 19th of March. So it took me 15 days to knit one sock. I mean, that seems a long time now I've said it, doesn't it? 2 weeks to knit one sock, but they're huge socks. Cast this one on the next day. So I cast this on the 20th of March. So we are now about eight days into that. And I'm onto the foot. So another however many days, probably about the same. So it'll probably take me about a month to knit a pair of socks for Dan, when historically, honestly, they feel like they just drag on because they just go on and on and on. But when I'm just doing 10 rounds a day, that just goes really quick, and I put it down and forget about it. Next day, 10 rounds, put it down, forgetting about it. And they just go so quick. So this method of knitting, especially when it's something like Dan's socks, when they're so long, when it's stocking stitch as well, because that just can drag a little bit, can't it, when you've not got any pattern or anything. It's just genius, and it works brilliantly. So these will be finished for next time, and I can block them and show them to you, and then you'll have another pair of socks, and that's just lovely, isn't it? So my heel colour, I said last time, but I dyed this heel colour because I just thought it looked really nice with the stripes. And this colour is gunmetal from Jacquard, just purely gunmetal. So if you want to know what that, if you've been dyeing yarn with me, and I mean we haven't used this colour. I'm pretty sure we haven't used gunmetal. I don't think we have. I might be wrong though. But anyway, that's the colour it looks like. And these will be done next time, and then I can pick another yarn for Dan. So I would like to not always have a pair of socks on the go for you, but mostly, because you do love your socks, and you know, I like to keep him supplied because they don't last forever, do they? But yeah, that's my lovely Dan socks.
Apologies for the drama that was going on in the background as you were talking about those socks.
There was drama?
There was drama because
what happened?
I stupidly put my swatch
that's your swatch.
in the bag with the needles with my project.
Right.
And you know, even when you've just got one project in
they
there...
got tangled up?
Well, it all got tangled up, and it was like tangled up actually in the knitting here.
Oh, no.
And because it's knitted in the same yarn, you couldn't work out what was.
Oh.
So I had to pull it round, and then, I mean, it was just all over the place. Top tip,
Goodness.
Don't put your swatch in your project bag with your project when you start knitting. Why you would anyway, I really don't know, but
no,
was a complete fool.
You just do things.
No, I think I put it in there thinking I'd show it, but I made so much progress on the project,
jumper,
it didn't seem to make much point in showing it. Speaking of progress, look, I'm into... Oh, it's close now. It's close. Look, I'm...
Oh, my goodness.
I'm that far away from finishing. Oh,
wow.
Oh, my goodness. This is stupendous. This, ladies and gentlemen, is Hadrian's Cowl. No, it's not.
No, it's
mine.
not. You're going to have it.
No, I'm not. I'm knitting this for you.
Are you?
You look amazing in it.
Really?
Yes.
I didn't know you were knitting that for me.
Of course I am.
Well, that's very lovely, isn't
And you
it?
love your cowls.
I
and you
do love my cowls.
These colours are stupendous. It's the Merino Yak, which is
Regia Merino Yak.
just really, really great for colour work. And through this project, Kay's a genius because she, creates these projects for me to work out my colourwork skills and, fingering weight colourwork skills. This project, starting with a Sweetheart cowl, running through this cowl, this has all been getting me to the point where I would feel confident and comfortable enough with my technique to be able to knit a tank top. And of course, I am now. And so it's just lovely in a way to sort of see, learning. It's an interesting thing. I was talking to you about this just the other day. Learning, you have to learn how to learn. I know that seems stupid.
No, it doesn't.
Until you experience what it's like to put in effort in an area and then see results. Someone could tell you that, but until you experience it, you don't understand it.
No.
And I think it's such an important skill, and it's one of those skills which so many people, even going through school education, people don't get to that point. And I think that half the battle for finding your thing in life is this. Because when you learn how to learn, you can take the things that you love and you can become better at them. And when you've combined those two things, so I've taken something I love, I've taken my ability to be able to learn and understand how I best learn, I put the two together, and suddenly you then start making amazing progress in your interests. And that's when you find your thing. You know, it was lucky for me, I suppose. I think music, and this is probably the reason why so many successful schools, if you look across the world, some of the most successful education systems, and, you know, more locally, if you look at really successful schools, 9 times out of 10, they've got a great music department. And the reason for that is, I think practicing an instrument is such a quick way to learn. If I work at something, I'm going to get better.
Yeah.
And that then, it moves across into your other subjects as well. And I think it's why, you know, music is such an important and powerful thing. But, you know, back to the knitting, this has just been the most amazing project to knit. And
2 yarns.
I fear, Kay, that I'm now at that point where I'm really starting to worry about finishing it. I don't like finishing it.
Oh, right. You want something else?
Well, no. You've got enough on your plate at the moment. I mean, it's just like, oh.
It's a Regia Merino yak. It's lovely stuff. It's 58% wool, 28% polyamide, and 14% yak. And you just need one, you need one ball of each to do the cowl.
I've used this yarn for so many different projects now, from socks to cowls, and it's just lovely. I wonder what a jumper would be like in it. Expensive.
Yeah, quite expensive. Yes. Well, it's to be lovely.
Yeah.
It feels lovely.
Yeah.
I think it's nice and soft. I don't think it's got really a prickle as such.
It feels heavier than the Jameson as well.
Oh, definitely. Yeah,
and I think that I'm a real believer in light garments. And I think, that's why the Let Lope is so phenomenal.
Yeah.
But then also the Jameson and Smith, because whilst I might not be enjoying as much, it's perfectly pleasant. And I'm not critical of it, not even slightly. I just don't enjoy working with it as much as I maybe expected.
Fair enough,
because the fingering weight is so lovely.
Yeah.
And I thought it would be more like just working with thicker fingering weight.
Fingerwing weight.
And it isn't.
No.
It feels very different. It's like a different yarn, to be honest. This, I just wonder, if you knitted it into a jumper, I might find that jumper a bit too heavy.
But this is double thickness.
That's true.
If you just think of it as one layer, that's not...
Oh, no, but you see, inevitably, if I knitted a jumper, it would be a colour work. So they probably would be.
I mean, colour work will always be warmer because you've got the strands running across the back, haven't you?
But it's an interesting one, though, isn't it?
Imagine this centre bit, though, on the jumper.
The yoke.
I cannot design jumpers, so don't even go there. Or I should say, not that I cannot. It's not, not in my
So that's
agenda.
around the yoke. Put your arm up. That bit's around the sleeve.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Well, off you go then, design a jumper.
And that's all the way through the body. Too busy.
No.
Too busy.
I wouldn't do that because that's the bit where you've got a bit of ruching going on, haven't you?
But have you looked at my top bit?
Yeah, I have, but there is some ruching.
Yes, there is, but it's not as bad.
Through that section.
I don't think it's as bad.
It's difficult, it's in this section here. Do you know where it's got that regular changing of colour? And that's when it's most difficult, I think, colour work.
Yeah, it is.
Because that's regularity of you changing the colours is what can...
I mean, what I've noticed is...
But, when it's blocked, they look very different, this and this. This is better than this. You've done it wrong.
How have I done it wrong?
There's 3 stitches here, there's only 2 here.
So that's my Hadrian's Cowl.
Yes.
Maybe ripping it back.
Maybe.
Well, I think probably will be. Which, in a way, I don't mind... From the knitting aspect, because then it alleviates the whole problem with me panicking about what I'll knit next.
True enough.
So every cloud has a silver lining. And also, what that also tells you is how important it is to read forward on your patterns.
You weren't even okay. Yes. Look at your charts. Don't presume you know.
Look at your charts. Don't presume you know. Ugh, typical bloke. What else is on your needles?
So the final thing I've got today is in a lovely bag I made myself, actually. I made this bag quite a few years ago. And I got the fabric from Little Skein in the Big Wool. Is that the name of the shop? I think it is. But she did this range of fabric. She made bags herself and then she sold the fabric. So I bought some of it and made myself a little House on the Prairie yarn themed bag. which is adorable. So in this bag I've got a hat, and this hat will be a gift for Grandpa Steve, and it's knitted with the gigantic ball of yarn that we spoke about. I think last time. Did I show you this last time? I think I showed you this last time. The one I was reviewing.
Is this?
Premium acrylic.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, it is. So this is Wendy with wool. It's so funny because Dan's mum's called Wendy, and it just makes me think of Nana Wendy, and she's got some wool, and it's for Grandpa Steve, so she's going to get this. It just amuses me. Little things amuse me. And this was one of those gigantic 400 gram balls that you can get. And in the 400 grams, you get 800 metres of yarn. And it's a 75-25. So it's 25% wool and 75%
premium acrylic.
There we go. And the colourway I've got is Fjord, which is this lovely denim-y sort of blue. Very pretty. And I wound off a ball because the 400 gram ball is so gigantic, honestly, you know, and I was knitting this in bed. It's just ridiculous. So I just wound off enough for the hat, or more than enough actually. And I've actually nearly finished it. It's knit up super quick. I'm on the decreases. So here's the hat. So I've made up this pattern. This yarn is classed as an Aran weight, or is sold as an Aran weight. I don't know. I mean, you're knitting with Aran weight.
That's way thicker.
Yours is way thicker than mine. I truly think this is more like a heavy DK to worsted, but that's totally fine. So I used 4mm for the rib, and I'm using 4.5mm for the body. And I think that's perfect for it. And I made up the pattern, but it's based on a free pattern that I've got out there that you can download and knit up yourself, called the Angel Hat. I put that out a while ago, and that is with an Aran weight. It was with a hand-dyed, I dyed myself, Aran weight. So I followed that pattern, except I put in a different stitch pattern here. So I've done a 1x1 rib, and then I've actually put in the pattern that's in my Hobbity socks. The Hobbity socks was a pattern that I put into our festive knitability at the back end of last year, and loads of our lovely patrons have knit up the Hobbity socks, and I showed them here on the show at the time. And it's just a lovely textured pattern. I thought I'm going to pop that in, and I think it looks great in the hat. Really lovely. So I'm on the decreases now at the top, so I've moved over to DPNs. So I'll finish this in no time. I'm hoping it fits him okay. I think Nana Wendy said Steve's got a head on the bigger side, so that's why I went for the size I went for, because I tried on my angel hat. I put it on Dan because he's got a bigger head as well, and it fit fine. It looked a bit daft because it had a pom-pom, but it fit fine.
I've decided pom-poms are me. I should have pom-poms on all my hats.
No, Bryony laughed her head off when she saw you, so that's always a good indication not to do something.
I've decided next year, or this winter.
I should put a pom-pom on this for Steve, can you imagine?
This winter, I'm going slouchy with pom-pom.
No, you're not.
I'll look marvellous. And I'm going to push it back on my head so it looks...
I'm hoping this doesn't really have much slouch at all. I knit to 7 inches, I think.
He's got quite bouffant hair as well.
He does have big hair. And I wanted it to be long enough because he wants this for the garden. Or Nana Wendy asked me if I'd knit him a hat and a cowl for the garden when he's out gardening in the colder weather. And I wanted it to come over his ears because I can't see the point in having a hat that doesn't cover your ears, because it's your ears that get freezing, isn't it?
Yeah,
for me
really
it is
cold.
anyway.
Yeah.
So fingers crossed it'll be all right. You know, he'll put it on his head and he won't even notice because, you know, he's a bloke. Yeah. So I'm nearly finished with this and I've really enjoyed it. It didn't take very long at all, really. I did it on a 16-inch circular and then I've just moved over to double points to do the decreases.
And how are you finding those DPNs?
These are okay. This is a set that I bought recently. I'm going to do a review on them. I think it was Knit Pro Bamboo.
Right.
A little set that I saw on, I think, Wool Warehouse.
Right.
And I thought, oh, they look interesting because I am always usually quite short short. I don't have many double points that are in sort of slightly larger sizes for things like hat decreases. So I thought I'll pick those up. They weren't hugely expensive, and they are kind of like just very basic bamboo needles, but perfectly fine. And I like that they are pale wood.
Yeah.
Instead of like a darker wood. I'm not keen on needles that are dark in colour. I just think it's sometimes tricky, especially with a darker yarn, to see your stitches. So I like light coloured needles. So they're perfectly lovely at the moment. The only thing with the set I bought is it runs from 2mm up to, I don't know, 5 maybe. But there's no 2.25mm. There's 2mm, 2.5, 3, 3.5. No, but there isn't a 2.25mm. So if you were buying them thinking, I'll buy those for sock knitting, there's no 2.25, which I think is what most people use. So that's a bit of a shame. I think they missed a trick there with them. But
they were trying to get you to buy the set and some singles.
Well, I don't know if they do singles. I'm not even sure.
That's even worse.
I don't even know. Because why would you need... The only reason you would need a 2mm, because there's a 2mm in there, and there's a 2.5. Really, the most common thing you're going to knit with those two sizes is socks, isn't it? And if you're going to knit socks, then I would say the majority of us use 2.25. All they've got to do is think, let's pop a 2.25 in there as well. And then the set will appeal to sock knitters as well as people that, like me, wanted them for the slightly larger sizes. But I'm not on the marketing team of, I think they were Knit Pro. I'm going to do a review of them anyway.
Cool.
So there's Steve's hat. So again, I'll have that finished for next time and I'll show you. I'll give it a light blocking and I'll show you all finished. So fingers crossed.
That sounds funny. A light blocking.
Give it a light blocking. I don't know, does it sound like I'm being cruel or something?
I don't know.
I don't know.
It sounds interesting. Hey, look. Last time on the Rise and Fall of the Monasteries, we visited Revo and we discovered the story of St. Ulred. Mm-hmm. Kay loves St. Ulred so much. His book, one of his books, because he wrote loads, but his book, Spiritual Friendship, which I'm actually going to reference in this episode that you're about to watch, of the Rise and Fall of the Monasteries, is coming today.
Dan's got it for me.
Woohoo!
Yay!
I didn't force it on her. Kay said that she thinks Ulred is amazing and a very wise man and that she would like to read more. So I bought it for her as a little present. Yes. So that's very exciting. So yes, last time we discovered all about St. Ulred. And if you'll recall, in the process of visiting Revo, we also found out about a monastery that was over the hill with the whole problem with the bells. Well, what better way to continue our series than with going and discovering the story of those poor monks who had to move their monastery because their bells kept waking up the monks of Revo Abbey. So I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as you enjoyed the last one. Yes. I certainly enjoyed making it, and Kay certainly enjoyed it.
I loved it. You're going to love it.
Hope so.
Put your earbuds in if you've got them.
Here we go. It's time for episode 3 of the Rise and Fall of the Monasteries. "1,500 years ago, a way of life arrived in Europe that shaped the development of the world we live in today. Healthcare and education are just two of the many innovations pioneered by the men and women of the monasteries. From the height of their powers at the time of the Normans to their total destruction at the hands of a tyrant king and a cruel emperor. This is one of the most epic stories the world has got to tell, and whilst their way of life may have virtually disappeared, everywhere you look across Europe, you'll find ruined monasteries, echoes of their fascinating existence. And in this series, I'm going to take you to some of my absolute favourites. This is going to be quite an adventure. Welcome to the rise and fall of the monasteries. Welcome back everyone to the rise and fall of the monasteries. After our spectacular trip to Revo Abbey in episode 2, this time I'm delighted to bring you to a part of the world that my family has been visiting for over 70 years. My mum first visited here not long after World War II, and when my passion for monasteries began after she took me for those picnics at St Mary's Abbey in York, this was the first place that she brought me and my brothers to. This time we've travelled 10 miles about from, it's 10 miles from Revo Abbey. We are southwest of Revo Abbey. We're in the very corner of the North York Moors National Park. And thousands of years ago, this part of the world used to be the edge of a huge sea. The problem is those high points lie about a mile in that direction. And the fact that there was a sea here, probably for millions of years actually, it really left its mark, and it still does to an extent today on the landscape. It makes this part of the world really quite boggy. Now, as we discovered last time, it was very common around the time of the golden age of the monasteries for rich and wealthy landowners to gift land to these new budding religious communities. And land that looks idyllic to us today, like this does, 900 years ago, it really was not that way at all. In 1177 AD, when the monastery that we're going to visit today was built, prior to it being built, the year before, the land around here was completely useless. If we were in a time machine and we'd come back to 1177, I would now be stood up to my waist in really sort of boggy, mossy water. Now, before we find out who tamed this landscape, I think we should really set the scene, and we should find out what was going on in the wider world as monasticism in England started to take hold. On Christmas Day in 1066, England's new King William I was crowned here at Westminster Abbey in London. Over the next 21 years, he stamped his authority on the English with the building of castles and the introduction of a new national language, French. 30 years later, as the fervour of Christianity grew across Europe, the last vestiges of Christianity were facing oblivion in Constantinople.
Their call for help launched the Crusades, and for the next 400 years, huge armies would clash in the name of religion across the Holy Land. Back in England, all was not well with the heirs to King William. His grandson Stephen could not agree with his cousin Matilda on who would take the throne of England, and so the country descended into civil war. For 15 years the family fought until finally a truce was agreed upon. King Stephen would rule until his death in 1154, when the English crown would pass to Matilda's son Henry Plantagenet. And so it was that on the 19th of December 1154, King Henry II and his wife Eleanor were crowned at Westminster Abbey, beginning a royal dynasty that would last until the time of the Tudors.
So we are off on our quest to find Byland Abbey. Now that name may sound familiar to you because I mentioned it in episode 2. Do you remember the story at Revo Abbey of the monastery that was over the hill, and they were ringing their bells at 2 o'clock and they were waking the monks at Revo, and then Revo rang theirs at 3:30 in the morning, remember, and they woke the monks at Byland. Well, that's the place we're looking for today. What better spot could there be to continue our story of the rise and fall of the monasteries, and what a world they were bursting into, one of Plantagenet royalty, one of crusades, and one of no accurate clocks. To which we, of course, today say 6 o'clock. It's fascinating, isn't it, to think of a world where there's no time, no accurate way of knowing what any time is. But that's just the tip of the iceberg, because in 1177 AD, when Byland Abbey first opened its doors, there was no police force, there weren't really any hospitals, we all spoke French, we wrote in Latin. So everyone we meet today will speak French and write Latin. And I haven't even told you the best bit. They don't even know that it's 1177 AD. This was the world into which the buildings of Byland Abbey were born. Now I say that because the monks of Byland Abbey had actually been in existence already for 43 years. They've got a really rich and interesting history. They'd actually started life at Furness Abbey over on the west coast of England. Their first abbot was a very ambitious young man called Gerald, and they set out to a place called Calder to build their very first community. So Gerald led his monks, no doubt battered and bruised, back home, back to their mother house, Furness Abbey, in the hope that they'd be allowed to come in, catch their breath, and then set out somewhere else to set up a new community. But would you believe the abbot of Furness wouldn't let them in? And he wouldn't let them in because Gerald refused to relinquish his rank of abbot. I told you he was ambitious, didn't I? Now, Gerald and his monks knew that the Archbishop of York was a great supporter of monasteries and new monasteries in particular. So they came up with a plan. They thought, right,
let's go to York, we'll go see the Archbishop, and hopefully he'll give us some land. The problem was, the journey from Furness to York, it's right the way across the middle of the country, and it really is truly perilous. You can imagine how unbelievably frustrating this must have been. Gerald and his men had really been through the wars, hadn't they? They'd been attacked by Scots. They'd been refused entry to their own home, the first place that they'd set out from, Furness Abbey. They travelled all the way across England, which really was a very challenging trip. They'd finally found a place to call home, and suddenly they thought it was going to be jeopardised. So it was agreed that Gerald, on his own, intrepid Gerald, would set out to the place where Gerald and his monks, it was really their sort of base of operations, the very first monastery that was ever set up for that particular order of monks was in France, and it was agreed that Gerald would go there to ask for independence from the house at Furness. Now, this is where it gets interesting, and it's why I was sort of skirting around it a little bit there, because Gerald and his monks were not Cistercians who we met last time at Revo. They actually came from an order of monks very similar to Cistercians, but they were called Saviniacs.
Abbot Gerald left his new home and set out for Dover on a 1,244-mile round trip, which included crossing the English Channel, all of this to get to the home of the Saviniac order. Saviniac monks took their name from Sivigny-le-Vieux, which was a village close to the site of their first monastery, not far from here on the north coast of France. The Saviniac order grew tremendously in its early years, founding 33 monasteries within 30 years of the order's beginning. Byland Abbey was one of these houses, and it was to here that Gerald travelled to ask for their independence.
Gerald arrived in France after what the history books tell us was a truly perilous journey. And I've got to say, I'm just in awe of this man. No matter what the world seems to throw at him, he always seems to find a way through. And you won't be surprised at all to hear that Gerald was completely successful in his mission. He petitioned the abbot of Sivigny, of the monastery at Sivigny, which was their home. That was the first place that their order had started out from, for independence and direct affiliation to him, and he granted it immediately. Gerald was overjoyed, and even though he was utterly exhausted after such a long trip, he set out for home in December 1141. But disaster was on the horizon. Whilst undertaking his journey home from France, Gerald fell ill, and he made it all the way to York. That's like 40 miles away from here. And then he died. I can't quite get my head around how tragic that is after all he's done, all the battles that they fought, Scottish armies, people refusing them entry, travel to France, find a home, and then right when everything was resolved, he didn't get to see it. Now, we know what happens next, because the new abbey's built, and of course the bells start to disturb the men at Revo, and a whole other problem arises. And when we heard about this story at Revo, it sounded quite trivial and really quite funny, but when you think about it from the perspective of the monks at Byland, who've been through all of this, and then now
there's one final problem, and it's bells waking people up too early. I bet they thought, we've had to deal with marauding Scottish warriors, and now some monks over the hill have caused us to move again. But there was a huge silver lining. The Savignac order was about to be taken over by the Cistercians, and as soon as that happened, the Cistercians decided to build the monks of Byland the most beautiful and elaborate home possible. And I'm convinced it was as a sort of, I'm really sorry guys, but here is the most amazing place to call home. And I think it's about time that we went and took a look at it. Welcome, everyone, to the cloister at Byland Abbey. Finally, after 43 years of searching, the monks of Byland had a place to call home. And my goodness, it truly was, and still is, spectacular. If there's a simple way to describe the difference between Byland Abbey and Rievaulx, Byland is beautiful and Rievaulx is striking. And there's a huge reason for that.
In the years between the building of Rievaulx and the building of Byland Abbey, much had been learnt about architecture in England. Whilst the first churches across Europe had followed the example of Rome with simple buildings like what we saw in the nave at Rievaulx, a new, more elaborate style of building had started to appear. With great pointed arches and huge stained glass windows, Gothic architecture had arrived in style. And Byland Abbey would go on to inspire many of the great religious buildings of England. One man led the way and was the driving force behind this spectacular building. His name was Roger, and he'd taken over from Gerald
as abbot after his death. And I love the little bits of sort of information that we can gather about Roger's character as we read through the history books. We know that he was a strong, jovial man who loved history nearly as much as he loved to eat. And one of his best friends was a prior from a nearby monastery, and his name was William of Newburgh. And Roger encouraged him to write a history of England, which he did. And it's one of the earliest histories of England, and because of the way that he wrote that, he's now known as the father of historical criticism. But Roger's greatest friend and the man who helped him plan and project manage this glorious building was Alred of Rievaulx. Now, their friendship started on rocky ground because they were two rival abbots, each running a monastery that was disturbing each other with their bells. But a friendship grew. Supposedly, it was over food. Alred loved Roger's cooking, or at least his recipes.
Because we're on our way to the kitchen, where Roger started out life as a 16-year-old sub-cellarer. His job was to assist the man in charge of all the abbey's provisions. Chief among those in medieval England was food, and it was from here that this small kitchen that we're just making our way into now would churn out food for the whole abbey community. Now, Byland would never reach the heights of Rievaulx with the size of its community. At its height, it only had 80 monks, whilst Rievaulx, for example, had 300. But still, I wouldn't fancy preparing food for the abbey community in this small kitchen. It did have serious capacity, though. Just take a look at this huge fireplace. There's 3 more of these within the kitchen.
Now, meat would only be eaten by the sick, so the majority of these fireplaces would have had pots suspended over them with boiling fish or maybe potage cooking on it. And potage is, of course, like a thick soup. Now, provisions to be turned into the food, which would have been eaten by the Abbey community, were brought in through that door just behind me. And in the middle of the room here, in the space now full of molehills, there would have been a table used for the preparation of the food that was then cooked on the huge fireplaces that are all around this room. I can't really imagine how hot it must have been. But where did the monks get their provisions from? It was all down to the lay brothers. Do you remember the men who only pray twice a day and the nave is reserved for them? Well, they were the people who kept the abbey running. They prepared all the food, but also they worked the fields which surrounded the abbey. Now, all medieval abbeys had farms attached to them. Their lands often spread for substantial miles directly around their abbey sites. There were farms for crops. There were also fish ponds for fish, because in the early years of abbey life, that was the diet. It was very strict. It was vegetables and fish. There was only a small amount of meat eaten, and that was by the really old or the sick. Now, the lay brothers were really well taken care of, because they actually had lots of special areas reserved just for them. The most popular of which was this that we're walking through now, because the lay brothers had their very own mini cloister.
Positioned directly below the kitchen, the lay brothers' cloister was used in a similar way to the main abbey cloister, for quiet contemplation, work, and a covered walk outside, even when it was raining.
And they didn't just have their own cloister, because the lay brothers and the choir monks were not really supposed to mix. So they also had their own dining room, and this is it.
This was known as the Frater. Central pillars would once have supported a second floor above where the lay brothers slept. Long tables ran down the side of the room looking inwards, making it easy for them to be served from the centre of the room. At its height, 160 men would have eaten here twice a day. This would have been a vibrant and happy space.
If you didn't find the lay brothers in their dining room having some lovely food, or in the cloister having a little walk, you might find them in here. This is the lay brothers' day room, and it was into here that they would come if they had a bit of time, had a bit of a break, it was raining outside and they wanted somewhere to sit down and have a little rest. Think of this as like a modern day business staff room. But twice a day they were called into the church for services. Prior to heading up into the nave for a service, the lay brothers made their way in here, a corridor that leads straight up into the abbey nave. They would wait here before the doors were opened, and then they were let in for their service. And you can imagine the hushed excitement and maybe the gossip spreading from around abbey life. But cut into the western wall of this corridor is something truly marvellous.
There are 35 niches running the length of this wall, and they're just remarkable. These were used as seats for the lucky lay brothers that managed to snag one prior to heading in for a service.
Look at this. Wow, it's surprisingly tight actually. These seats being here tell us that sometimes the wait must have been a little while. I don't know about you, but I'd have definitely wanted to get here fast enough to get a seat so I could have a little rest and talk to one of my workmates next to me prior to being called up into the service in the nave. It was, though, worth the wait, because finally the doors would have been opened, a bell would have rung, and the lay brothers would start processing straight up this corridor. It led to a short staircase which has now completely disappeared, but its destination was right here and on up into this glorious nave. Now at Revo, the majority of the walls of the nave had long since been robbed away, but I'm delighted to tell you that here at Byland, that's not the case at all. The church was very much the fruit of Abbot Roger, ably assisted by his best friend, Allred of Revo. This would become the most ambitious and beautiful church that the Cistercians had ever built. And when we come back in part 2, we're going to be exploring more of this wonderful place and discovering some of its secrets from ancient times.
Folks, I just love Roger.
Oh,
Oh my goodness.
Yes.
Now, don't get me wrong, Allred is a bit of a dude, but he's a saint. And for me, Roger's just that little bit more accessible. And I just think it's amazing that their friendship clearly, I mean, we're going to find out even more in part 2, but it clearly sort of delivered so much to the world. And you know, I just think that how amazing to think that it started with a conflict. And then from that conflict comes this friendship where they're like, because they're close enough. I mean, it'd probably be maybe an hour's horse ride, an hour or two's horse ride, you know, to each place.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe less than that, actually. It would be less than that because it's only
From
10.
Revo to...
It's only 10 miles. So you do that in
It's
the morning.
per hill, isn't it?
Yeah.
So,
I mean, that would be the
I don't
challenge.
know how long it takes in horse time.
But just sort of amazing to think that, you know, they became such close friends. And there's still so much to find out because Roger leads quite an epic life, shall we say.
Yes.
And you'll find out more about that when we come back in part 2. So I think that it's time that we found out.
Yes.
There's something sat here waiting to appear already on the bloggers.
Yes.
So I should say, Kay Jones, what's off your noodles?
I do have 2 things, which is very exciting. And the first of those 2 things are my DK weight Wizardy socks.
Oh, they're good.
All done, yay.
Very squishy.
Oh, they're lovely. So the Wizardy socks is a pattern of mine. It's my most recently published pattern. Thank you to everybody who's gone and purchased it. It's proving to be a really popular pattern, which is just fantastic. I'm really thrilled because it is an absolutely lovely pattern to knit. You know, I knit the socks, the main Wizardy socks. I've knit the DK version, and it absolutely won't be the last pair that I knit. I'm definitely going to knit this pattern for Sockaween this year because it's just perfect for the theme. But yeah, these are the DK weight that I knit using King Cole Merino Blend DK, and the colour is Tyree. So it's not a sock yarn, it's just 100% wool, but I'm totally fine with that because these will just be like pyjama socks that I'll wear in the house, and they will last as long as they last, and that's just perfectly fine. But these I'm going to add to my sock stash. So Sock Stash is a year-long knit-along that we're running with our patrons, and we're basically just knitting socks, any kind of socks that you like, and we're stashing them away in a box or a bag or a drawer for the end of the year, when you can either give them to yourself or you can use them as gifts at Christmas or do whatever you want, you know. And it's just been super fun. So this, I think, is my 4th pair.
Cool. And now for something completely different.
Well, Okay. So I've finished the Sophie scarf. Now, the first thing that I want to say about the Sophie scarf is an apology, because when I first spoke about this scarf, I made the presumption that the designer, who's Petite Knit, was French, and that was an incorrect assumption. She's actually Danish, so I do apologise. We had lots of people sending us messages correcting me, so I'm really sorry. It's my fault. I just made a presumption because of the name, and her aesthetic to me just looks very French. So anyway, you all know who Petite Knit is and that she's not French.
Isn't that a French word?
Well, petite is a French word, but it's used universally, isn't it? We use petite in the English language, don't we? Yes, so she's Danish anyway. So I finished the Sophie scarf, which is this long sort of item. And I used one of the recommended yarns. I used Lang Cashmere Premium, I think it was, Premium. I used just over a ball. I think each ball's like 25 grams, and I used maybe 10 grams out of the second ball. And this colourway was Camel. And it was a perfectly pleasant knit, but I'll be honest, I did get a bit weary when I was doing the decreases. So you basically increase, and then decrease to create this sort of long, skinny triangle. When I was doing the decreases, I did get a bit fed up because it's just the same repeat over and over and over and over and over. You'll know, old people that have made this. And for some people, that's perfect knitting. But it just really wasn't quite enough to keep me amused. Now, I can't work out how to wear this. I know that like a million people have knit these, and people have knit multiple of these. And I put it on, and like Dan's like, no. And Bryony was like, no. I said, well, maybe I'm wearing it wrong. And on the pictures, it looks like she's kind of wrapped it twice and tied it in a knot. I kind of struggle to wrap it twice. It feels like it's garrotting me. So let's try again. So that goes around, and then it comes around, and then I've only got this little bit left, look. And it's really strangling me. And, you know, I got the gauge. I'm using the exact yarn, and then you tie it off to the side or something, but that just is so tight around my neck. So then I thought, well, maybe I don't. Oh gosh, maybe I don't. I feel claustrophobic. Maybe I don't wrap it twice, and maybe I just wrap it once and then tie it. It looks so cute in the. Oh, it just looks a bit daft on me. It looks so cute in the pictures on the lady, on the model. I don't know if that is the designer, I'm not sure. And do I knot this twice maybe? But then that just looks silly. I've no idea what to do with this item. And honestly, I just cannot see that I'm going to wear it.
Maybe it's just not your thing.
I just don't think it is my thing. I think I'm doing it wrong. I think I'm tying it wrong. But the thing is, if I need instructions on how to wear something, then for me that's... it's like a barrier to making another one, because I just don't know what I'm doing wrong. I think having this central section, which is deeper, seems to cause me a problem because it just folds. So I kind of think, what's the point in having it a deeper section? I might as well have just knit a long skinny scarf effectively and tie that around my neck. I don't know. I feel like I've not got it. Somehow I'm absolutely
quick project though.
Yeah, quick. I'm absolutely not criticising the design at all. The pattern,
Just not your thing.
Was perfect. I just don't think it's my thing.
That's fine.
But I used the yarn, and you never know. I might figure it out. So yeah, that's the Sophie scarf all done.
Cool. That means we can get back to the second part of the rise and fall of the monasteries.
Welcome back, everyone, to the rise and fall of the monasteries. We've made our way into the most sacred part of the church. This is the choir, and it's now recognised, this whole building, as one of the key pieces of early Gothic architecture in Northern Europe. It really is utterly spectacular, and I can't wait to show it to you. So I thought what we would do is take a little tour straight through the middle of this building so I can show you some of my absolutely favourite little bits. We're going to start in the nave, and that's just down here. We're stood just outside in the Galilee porch in the nave of the church. And as we discovered last time, this was a key piece of Cistercian church architecture. But what I love about this one are some of the features and some of the hints of what once was here that we can see hidden in the walls. Take a look at this.
Can you see the support stones sticking out from the wall just above the doors? These were for the wooden beams which once held up the roof of the Galilee porch. But if we take a look at the southern door, something's different. Those support stones are a little bit lower.
Now, archaeologists have actually studied these holes really closely, and they've discovered that the southern door was built first, and the canopy was put over the top, and it must have been too low. So when they put in the central and the northern door, they adjusted the height so it was perfect. But how did they know that the southern door was older and that it had been put in first?
The answer is actually how these doors are carved. If you take a look at that door there, it's much rounder than the central door and the northern door. The southern door is Romanesque, so it was obviously constructed first. The other two are Gothic, so they must have been added later.
This was actually just one of the many changes made at Byland Abbey, because if we look up a little bit further, we see one of my favourite features of this whole wonderful place, the Great Rose Window.
And here it is. We actually know the design for this because it inspired the rose window in York Minster, which is still in place today. Rather amazingly, the original stonemason's drawings for this window were found by archaeologists in one of the Abbey's outbuildings. What makes this so interesting, though, is if we look at the window from the inside. Can you see on the left of your screen there something looks a bit off? The blocking up of that stair turret and the triple shafts which divide the lancet windows suggest that the original design was just for those three lancet windows that we can still see in place today.
So the rose window was actually a change to the original plans, and my goodness, I'm so glad they made it. So let's take a walk straight up the nave, and let's try and imagine what this wonderful building would have looked like when it was first built 846 years ago. Walking up into this nave would have been absolutely spectacular because the walls, in fact the whole church building, was lime washed white, and onto the white walls they painted red lines for where the bricks would have been. It would have looked totally spectacular. Now, it was flanked either side by aisles, and they were supported by piers which we can still see the remains of today.
A wall actually ran up each side of the nave about 5 foot high in between those square piers which you can see either side of me. Its purpose was to support the lay brothers' tiered wooden stalls which leant against it.
Now, the first 6 bays marked out the part of the church which was reserved for the lay brothers. But as we leave the first 6 bays behind, we walk into a part of the church known as the retro choir. Now, whilst the nave here is just gorgeous, it's the choir which for me retains some of the most stunning parts of what's left of Byland Abbey. This was of course the place used by the choir monks 8 times a day to pray. We're walking through the choir and the transepts, and this really was the most sacred part of the church. This is the place which was cordoned off and held for the choir monks to come into 8 times a day to pray. And this section here, this was the presbytery. This was the main area which for those 8 services, that's where the choir monks would be. But then outside of that time, there was also a lot of time for private prayer, but also prayers for rich patrons who donated money to the abbey specifically for the prayer which the monks would then make to them for their donations. It brought in a huge amount of the abbey's income. It really paid for all monasteries, so it was a very important part of their day. It's also here in this part of the church where you'll find Byland Abbey's most gorgeous treasure, I think, because up until 1250 the floor would have been flattened earth and then it would have been strewn with rushes. But then in 1250 they decided to give the abbey a little bit of an upgrade, and they put in the most gorgeous tiles, and they're gorgeous, stunning painted tiles. But unfortunately, I mean, these things have been down an awfully long time because they were put down, like I say, in 1250, but it's the first time I've ever visited here when they've all been covered up. Now, I'm sort of glad it's been done in a way, because at least we know that these things are being protected for the future, and it probably is just done in the winter, thinking about it, because we're just sort of getting to the end of that period now. But you can catch just a little glimpse of these stunning tiles, and I think we should just take a little bit of a look because they're just breathtaking.
Now look at this. Can you see the glimpse of tiles below that plank? A hint of the wonder that lies beneath. But thanks to our many previous visits, this is what lies beneath. Extensive remains of this paving was found intact during its excavation in the 1920s. Although the glaze is much worn, these floors give you a clear impression of what the whole church would have looked like, and it is just spectacular, isn't it?
And if you like the little sink that we saw at Revo Abbey for the monks to wash their hands in as they came in for a service, you're going to love the one here at Byland.
The difference in the 2 sinks really does show the difference between the Romanesque and the Gothic architecture of the 2 buildings which we visited over the last 2 episodes. Whilst Revo was small and formal with its sink, this one is quite the piece of plumbing. There's actually 3 drains, so it must have dealt with quite a large amount of water. And look at the intricate carvings beneath it too. A real contrast to Revo. This one really is a masterpiece.
So we've made our way out of the church and into the cloister. And as I'm sure you'll remember, this was the main hub of activity for any monastery really, but specifically a Cistercian monastery. Now this one is actually 5 feet bigger than Revo's. And if you think that Abbot Allred and Abbot Roger designed this place together, you have to wonder if there's some friendly rivalry going on. Or did Allred love cloister so much and value his friendship with Roger so much, he wanted to make sure that he got a really good one? Personally, I think it's the latter, because Allred actually wrote a book which is called Spiritual Friendship, which you can still buy to this day. And this particular bit I'm going to read to you now, I'm told was inspired by his friend Roger.
The reward of friendship is friendship itself. Anyone who hopes for anything else does not understand what friendship is. For no medicine is more valuable to cure our temporal ills than a friend, one who we may turn for consolation in times of trouble, and with whom we may share happiness in times of joy.
Abbot Roger must have been truly humbled by the words written by his close friend. And in 1167, when Allred lay close to death, it was to Roger that he called. Sadly, Allred died not long after, and Roger said in the years that followed that Allred was his inspiration in every way. And for Roger, many years were going to follow, because Roger was abbot of Byland Abbey for 54 years. Now, when you consider that the average age of people in that period of time was 28, I think it's absolutely astounding. And the place which Roger would have really sort of governed Byland and, you know, steered its course through the choppy waters of medieval England was the chapter house. And that's just up here. It's much smaller than the chapter house that we saw at Revo. But it's perfectly formed, and you can just imagine jovial Abbot Roger, who would have sat about here actually, guiding his community of monks for 54 years. Just amazing. And then of course all the abbots who came afterwards. And Roger did a stupendous job, because whilst Revo is bigger and whilst Fountains Abbey is even bigger, which we're going to visit later on in the series, Byland, a much smaller house, came to be known in Roger's lifetime as one of the 3 jewels of monastic life in northern England. And I think just out here we can find another of Allred's influences on Abbot Roger, because do you remember at Revo there was a cupboard just at the corner of the cloister for the books for the monks who were working in the north arm of the cloister? Well, here at Byland, Roger's built the library exactly where the cupboard was. Just superb. There's one final stop on our tour of Byland Abbey, and I think I've saved the best for last, because it's fair to say that one man powered Byland to its heights, and that was Roger, its abbot for 54 of its most successful years. Now, we've seen elements of Roger and his personality in so much of what we've already seen as we've toured around the gorgeous abbey buildings. But how would you like to visit Roger's house? Yes, the abbot's house remains here at Byland Abbey, and it's just down here. Welcome everyone to Roger's house. Now this really is quite grand, and there's a very important reason for that. One of the biggest jobs of the abbot was to entertain the great and the good, the local landowners, and for the bigger abbeys, and that would have included Byland maybe sometimes, even important people nationally and potentially even internationally. Certainly that was the case up at Revo. And the reason why he had to do that was he had to secure money, because what he wanted was he wanted people to give money to the abbey. The monks would then pray for them in the church, and that would then keep this place running. The money from patrons was absolutely vital. So how did he do that? Very similar to how we do that today. Entertaining. He had to wine and dine the great and the good of the surrounding area, and he did that right here.
Now, we all know that one of the most important elements to entertaining is food and drink, and this is where they were stored and prepared for service in Roger's house. This room is called a buttery. It takes its name from the Latin and French words for bottle. You'll find butteries in any grand house dating from the Middle Ages, and as time passed, a man was needed to look after the buttery, and he became known as the butler. The buttery had access to the most important room in the abbot's house. This is the Great Hall. It was the place where the abbot literally earned his money, developing relationships with important people in the hope that they would help support the work of Byland Abbey. For 54 years, 5 times longer than any other abbot who led Byland, Roger clearly used this space exceptionally well.
We finish in what would have been Roger's private sanctuary. This was his home, really. Those other buildings was where he entertained. This is where he would have spent, when he was here, is where he would have spent time in quiet contemplation, probably prayer, but also, certainly down here, he would have met with his most senior monks. Now, these pillars here that you can see, they're very similar to that room that we saw at Revo, where the monks used to work if it was raining or if it was too cold. And they would have looked very similar here. They would have been arched and they would have supported a floor above. And it was actually upstairs, which is of course now long gone, but that's where Roger's bedroom would have been. But down here, this is the place where he would have worked. So how does Roger's story end? Well, it's actually rather surprisingly. In 1196, he actually retired from being abbot. And let's just go back to what we spoke about a few minutes ago about his age. Because if we assume that Abbot Roger, when he, way back at the start of the story of Byland Abbey, when they first left Furness Abbey and he was serving as sub-cellarer, the guy who worked and supported the people in the kitchen, let's imagine that he was the youngest he could possibly be at that time, which is 16. So that would have made him, when he retired in 1196, because they left Furness in 1134, that would have made him 78 years old. And just to remind you, the average age was 28. It's astonishing, isn't it? What's even more surprising about his end is because he retired from being abbot, we don't actually know when he died. We know that he went back into the community. He went and lived back in the dormitory at 78 years old, back in the dormitory, leaving this house behind. But what we do know is that he lived long enough to tell his successor, who moved in here and became abbot, he lived long enough to tell that man his story and to tell that man the story of the founding of Byland. And that is how we know it to this day. what better way could there be to finish than with that? The legacy of Roger and Byland Abbey that still captivates people to this day. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time for more Rise and Fall of the Monasteries.
What a place! Oh my goodness, did you see that flooring?
And wasn't that cool? Because it was all covered up, as Dan showed you. They must have been protecting it, like you said, for the winter. But you'd got photos from when we went before, so you got to see it.
You tried to get me, but you failed.
Yes, no one else visiting got to see that lovely floor, but you got to see it.
Oh, yes. And what about those niches where they sat prior to going into the nave? Just amazing. I mean, really.
That was one of my favourite bits, and I said to you afterwards, I love that kind of just everyday life element to it, and just thinking, you know, that they had the foresight to think, oh, we've all got to stand here waiting to go into the nave. Let's put these little seats here for us to just have a sit down while we're waiting. I just think that's brilliant. I love that. And you were sat right there.
I was.
They must have been littler.
Yeah, definitely. They were.
Back in the day, because you had to really squeeze yourself
they were.
in. Yeah. People were smaller, weren't they?
Yeah, they were. I mean, for a long time after that, you know, people only started to get bigger. 17th, 18th, really, it's the 19th century when people properly got bigger.
Got taller.
Yeah. I think people are always quite surprised when they see armour. You know, proper armour. Henry VIII's armour in particular, which you can see at the Tower of London.
Was he not very tall? You always imagine him that he's going to be this big fella, don't you?
Well, he became big.
Yeah, he did.
But,
but
I mean, he
height,
was taller than normal, but he's still way shorter than
standards.
It's way shorter than what you expect. So another episode, Rise and Fall, all finished. What a wonderful episode. Thoroughly enjoyed filming that and really excited about what the future holds for the series.
Yes.
It's going to be just amazing. It'll be back. Rise and Fall of the Monasteries will be back on the 28th of April, because next time, my favourite blanket is back. Yes. And it's time for some fancy business.
Yes.
Because, it's time to start knitting the centre section.
We are fancy business.
And I'll tell you what we won't be knitting the centre section with.
Premium acrylic.
Yes, it's going to be marvellous. I can't wait for the next episode of My Favourite Blanket. I think you're going to love it. Oh, yes. Time to get knitting.
Yes. Very, very exciting. And the flower is a knitting-connected flower next time.
That's
marvellous. So get your thinking caps on, see if you can guess.
Right now, it's time for the Endy Bits.
Endy Bits.
Our latest radio show went down a bit of a storm. We published it last Friday, and you can find it wherever you get your podcasts. So it's linked in the show notes below as well. But the subject was, is chivalry dead? So we were sort of looking into what chivalry is, where it came from, and then we were talking about what is acceptable behaviour now for people like me. Is it cool for me to open doors? Or shouldn't I really do that anymore? So it was a really interesting episode.
It was really interesting.
And it certainly got people thinking and talking, which was really lovely.
Yeah.
And the radio show will be back next week. We've just broadcast our latest patron exclusive show.
Yes.
We took a trip down memory lane as we dug out all the garments I've ever knitted apart from one.
Yes.
I think it's just one.
It is just one, I think, because Nano Endy's got that. Yeah.
She does, and I really enjoyed that project, actually. That was cool. That was the Samantha. But we went through all the others, and there was way more than I actually expected.
Loads.
I mean, like piles. You just, you I don't know. It's funny that it shocked me.
Yeah.
But it was really lovely. It's a really cool thing to do, because it makes you sort of see visually where you were and where you are now.
How far you've come.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
But we also took a look at this year's Summer of Stitching, which is coming up in May till August. And we also checked in on our Sock Stash 2023. Yeah. And you can find a link to all our patron-only shows in the show notes below.
Yes.
And I think that's pretty much it.
Yes.
Yes.
Not bought anything recently?
What a show. It's been wonderful to see you. Another amazing Rise and Fall of the Monasteries. And now we can look forward to the next episode of My Favourite Blanket,
Very exciting.
which we will have for you when we see you in 2 weeks. So take care, everyone, and we'll see you soon.
See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Sitting and knitting, it's Dan and Kay, the bakery bears. Enthusiasm's not quitting for Dan and Kay, the bakery bears. They'll take you to fabulous places of which their favorites they'll share. You better buy a pattern and get yourself a bakery bear. You'll find yourself in a castle while watching the bakery bears. It never feels like a hassle to sit and watch the bakery bears. What's on your shelf or what's in